Thank you, Bishop Todd. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Ryan, wherever you are, for the invitation. It's wonderful to be with you guys. I'm excited. This has been such a rich day. We could quit now, and we would have things to chew on for a long time. So thank you to Jennifer and to Bill and to Q. So many good things. I'm sorry I missed last night. I got in quite late. But heard good things happen yesterday as well. So I bring you greetings from Houston, Texas, from Fuller Seminary. That's where my day job is. Fuller Seminary has a campus in Houston, so that's where I teach. I teach courses in systematic theology and in worship, and then every once in a while I get to teach courses in the arts. So I teach a course on theologies of beauty, the vocation of artists, worship in the arts, science fiction and theology. It's a lot of fun. Those are the really, really fun classes. But the truth is, I'm teaching eschatology right now, and I think that is just as fun as science fiction and theology because they're very similar. All right, so I know this is the bewitching hour of the day. Feel free to stand up, to walk around, to doodle, and if you need to take a nap, I will not be bothered. So I just trust that what I say will seep into your subconscious and produce something good. So in light of the topic and of the hour of the day, my subject matter will be the metaphysics of speech act theory in 17th century Paris music. I practiced that so I could say it with a straight face, but you guys ruined it. All right, in 2006, I led a team on a mission trip for artists to Istanbul, Turkey. We did three things there. We participated first in a street arts festival that included acrobats and break dancers and traditional Turkish music. We visited the Istanbul Museum of Graphic Arts, which is located in Üsküdar on the Asian side of the Bosphorus River and home to one of the world's rare collection of prints. And third, we participated in a fine arts festival at the private boarding school Robert College of Istanbul, which is a 154-year-old institution that is the oldest American school still in its original location outside of the U.S. Now, my experience there brought four things to my attention, and this, if you will, is the thesis of my talk. Number one, art and mission is not a replacement for traditional efforts in mission. The church's traditional work of preaching and evangelism and church planting and service are essential and non-negotiable, and they are not substitutable for the things that art might do. Number two, art and mission can go places where traditional missional efforts cannot. By this I mean that art has a capacity to more readily, easily cross certain physical and virtual boundary lines that so-called traditional efforts may not cross in that capacity. Number three, art and mission can do things that traditional mission cannot, which will be the substance of my talk. And then number four, art and mission can take a host of expressions and perform a wide range of purposes. That's my thesis. Now, before I get into specifics of what I mean, let me define my terms briefly. What do I mean by mission? Well, for the sake of my talk today, by mission I mean things that are very familiar to you. The triune God's redemption of the cosmos and the transformation of the human creature so that it might be holy and whole. In becoming holy like God, the human creature becomes holy itself and therefore truly itself, and in this way flourishes. And with regard to the cosmos, the mission of God is the establishment of the shalom of God as a visible representation of the kingdom of God. That's the idea of mission that I have in my head with my talk. What do I mean by art? Let me show you what I mean rather than give you a strict definition of it. I have a broad definition of art in my mind. I think of literary journals like Image Journal and Pixar movies like Inside Out. I think of performance artworks by Marina Abramovich and The Great British Bake Off. I have in mind public art and poetry of people like Langston Hughes and Malcolm Guite. I like to include ecclesiastical vestments. There you go. There. On we go. I like to include liturgical calendars, like the kind that Ryan and his wife and wonderful team have put together. I include beards, like mine and David Crowder's. We had a beard moment a few years ago. I like to include Childish Gambino's This Is America music video, which is one of the most astonishing things I've seen in a long time. I like to include llama-shaped coffee mugs and art installations by Andy Goldsworthy. Design of cities comes to mind, and Olivier Messiaen's Visions de la Main as a work of classical music. I have a broad notion of what I think of when I think of art. So it begs the question, what does art do uniquely? Let me suggest this. Art brings us into an intentional and intensive experience of the physical, affective, and imaginative aspects of our humanity. And it is characterized by its metaphoric quality. So, for example, what's the difference between an academic treatment, a journalistic treatment, and an artistic treatment of the topic of the so-called supernatural? Well, a work of art like Scott Derrickson's movie Doctor Strange, and Scott is a very serious, committed, thoughtful Christian. His movie is foregrounding the sensory, emotional, and imaginative aspect of the topic and presents itself as a metaphor for the strange nature of reality. So the arts are foregrounding the sensory, the emotional, and the imaginative and have this metaphoric quality to it. All right, then, how might the arts participate in the mission of the church? How might art bear witness in word and in deed to all that is bent and broken in our world, as well as to all that is right in our world, and enable us to imagine the world as God sees it? So allow me to suggest today a range of ways that art might do this work. And some of the examples are coming from Christians, some do not, but deserve our attention, I believe. And with each example, I will pose a question that would give us here in this room an opportunity to imagine how we, each in our respective contexts, might make God's mission tangible through the arts. So each example will be followed by one question. I have lots of examples because I'd prefer to show rather than tell. Okay, here we go, visual arts. This is a painting by a painter named Tim Lowley. He lives in Chicago. He has a daughter named Tema. Tema is cortically blind. She weighs 80 pounds, wears diapers, and has to be fed through a surgically implanted tube. Her spine is curved, her elbows are permanently dislocated, her feet are curled. When she goes outdoors, she has to be put in a stroller with a chest strap and a neck brace to hold her up. She frequently has seizures during which her muscles tense and she loses what little bodily control she has. She makes grunting or whining noises to indicate distress, but does not speak, and she rarely smiles. So why does Tim Lowley paint his daughter and put these works in public spaces like galleries? Like this work, Tema on Earth. He does so to remind the viewer that disabled children are not freaks, they're human beings. In his own words, Tema is strange, but so are most of us in our own unique ways. All of the things that our culture so highly values, like beauty and power and capability, my paintings have nothing to do with any of these things, and I hope they challenge our notion of what is valuable. So the question I pose to us is this. In what ways might we include works of visual art in our congregational life that draw our attention to the things that our society might reject as useless and prefers to keep invisible, but which Jesus makes visible, makes known, and makes beloved? That's one question. Music. We are what we sing, or as Gordon Fee, the New Testament scholar, used to tell his students, let me hear you sing, let me hear you pray, and I will write your theology. How, for example, might the practice of singing songs in a foreign language, a language that is not our native tongue in corporate worship, form us? Michael Hahn, who teaches at the Perkins School of Theology, says this. He says, singing the estribillo, the refrain of a Spanish language hymn, in the original language by a majority English-speaking congregation may say more about hospitality to Latinos and Latinas within the community than handshakes by the ushers or words of greeting from the minister. So we don't sing such songs on Pentecost Sunday only, which is coming up, and we don't sing such songs out of curiosity or simply to be cool. We sing them, as the Lutheran theologian Mark Bangert reminds us, so that the music might lead us to the people whose it is, to their joys and sorrows, to their unique insights into God's love for them and for the part of the earth that they inhabit. Which leads me to this question. In what ways might our church music enable us to rejoice and to lament with members of the global church, to feel their hopes and their loves too? And in what ways might our practices of congregational song bear witness to a watching world of the God who enables every tongue and tribe to be uniquely and beautifully itself, while also unified in mutual care and respect? So that's music. And now we do fashion arts. Contigo. Contigo is a clothing company based in Houston, Texas. Framed by a term that means family, kin, and the Spanish term with, tigo, contigo, with or for you, Contigo is an organization run by Christians who seek to create what they call exceptional lifestyle products that are made well, made right, made justly, and come with a reminder that someone's always with you and for you. And in their words, they believe there is an infinite power, grace, and freedom in knowing you are fully loved just the way you are because the God of the universe is with you and for you. It's a clothing company committed to just practices within the fashion industry, which is a rare thing. So it leads me to this question. Who are the artists, entrepreneurs in your community that you might consider investing in? And how might investing in them contribute to the common good of your city? So they're in my city. Artists in residencies. Reconciled World is an organization based in Southeast Asia and Africa that's committed to addressing issues of gendercide, generational poverty, and the neglect of children with disabilities. Now, one of its programs located in India is called Create Commission. And it runs an artist in residency initiative that brings artists into relationship with TB patients, rag pickers, destitute men, and vulnerable girls. Living together, Hindu and Christian artists are able to build relationships that they would never usually have with each other. For many, the artists who participate in the residency, it's the first opportunity that they've had to have in-depth conversation about spiritual issues with other artists who speak a similar creative language. I truly love my friend on the left-hand side, Stefan Eicher, is doing with this program, and I'm always encouraged to discover other believer artists around the world doing good under hard circumstances. Which raises the question, what is an art ministry in the global south that your community might consider supporting financially and relationally? Because trust me, they need it, and they have far fewer resources than we in North America have. Sculpture. Most people wear masks to obscure or change their identities. But there's a unique art therapy program located in Bethesda, Maryland, which is part of the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, where veterans are using this program to reveal often painful truths about themselves. Art therapist Melissa Walker, she's incorporated mask making into the Healing Arts program, whose purpose is to treat active duty service members who have traumatic brain injury and underlying psychological health conditions. The art masks, or PTSD masks, become metaphors for their identity. Participants make them in order to make sense of what seems senseless. This is Staff Sergeant Perry Hopman, served as a flight medic in Iraq. This is what he said. He said, I thought this was a joke, this art therapy program. I wanted no part of it because, number one, I'm a man and I don't like holding a dainty little paintbrush. Number two, I'm not an artist. And number three, I'm not in kindergarten. Well, I was ignorant, he said, and I was wrong because it's great. I think this is what started me kind of opening up and talking about stuff and actually trying to get better. This mask is called Buzzing and Bursting, created by a Marine. Pairs a smooth, calm exterior with the chaos simmering beneath the surface. The soldier who created this mask is titled Not Beyond Repair. Said that he wanted it to represent his putting the pieces of his life back together. This program, to my mind, is an excellent example of art therapy doing good in the world. And it raises this question. How might our practices of art give permission to people in our own communities to feel their sadnesses deeply and their angers too, in a way that leads to healing in our relationships rather than to shame and more profound dysfunction? An important question to ask, hard to execute, but still needs asking. Dance. This is Axis Dance Company based in Oakland, California, made up of an ensemble of disabled and non-disabled performers. Its founding artistic director had a vision to gather a group of dancers with and without physical disabilities to explore dance. Its hope is to build a bridge between contemporary dance, integrated dance, and disability culture. Watching some of its performances has reminded me of the importance of our physical bodies and of the church's responsibility to develop a sound theology of the body. The literary critic William Deresiewicz, in his 2017 commencement address at Oregon College of Art and Craft, said this: people are hungry to restore their connection to the physical world, the sensual world, the world of objects that display the marks of time and of the human touch, the world of things that are made by hand, the world the hand makes. I hear this comment and I hear an invitation to the church to consider how its practices of the body might serve not only the healing of our own broken and bent bodies, but also contribute to the God-honoring treatment of our neighbors' bodies. This is the question that comes to my mind. In what ways might our practices of passing the peace, or holding hands in prayer, or bowing together at communion, or raising our hands to receive the benediction become ways in which our physical bodies might participate in the Spirit's healing work in the world? The oratory arts. When I was a pastor at a church in Austin, Texas called Hope Chapel, I started a Good Friday service. It had a very simple frame, but we did it the first time, 2001, and it's been going since, so 17 years now, and a few other churches in Austin, Texas have adopted it. I love the liturgical calendar. I love every service in the liturgical calendar. I love the liturgy on Sundays, but if I had to choose, this is my absolute best service, and this is why. The service is marked by a rhythm of seven, a triad of sevens, where we ask members from the congregation, everything from young people, as young as, say, 12, all the way to elderly folks, to bear witness alongside one of these 7 last words of Jesus. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. I am thirsty. Behold my mother. Behold, you'll be with me in paradise, so on and so forth. The invitation is not to preach a sermon. It's not to tell us the moral of the story. It's simply to bear witness to their own pain as they stand at the foot of the cross, bearing witness to Christ's own pain. So it begins with a song, a hymn that we sing together. A person has 5 to 7 minutes to share, and then we have a moment of silence, and that's repeated 7 times. If I could only invite non-Christians to one service in the whole year, it would be this service. Because for me, this has the most concentrated, forceful representation of the body of Christ bearing witness to the wounds of Christ in their own wounds. And it's deeply moving. I find myself weeping every time I'm there because I'm reminded again how much sorrow and heartbreak there is in our own communities. And so it raises this question for me. In what ways might we practice the art of testimony in a way that allows our neighbors outside of our communities to hear the stories that involve evidence of the goodness and the certain rescue of God, but also of heartache and loss, and of stories with uncertain outcomes that yet demonstrate faithful perseverance? I think if our neighbors were able to hear those stories, it might stir something in their hearts that would want to know who this God named Jesus is. Public art. Dutch artists Dre Urhan and Jeroen Koolhaas work directly with the people who populate Rio de Janeiro's slums, using the arts to spark hope in places that are often short on hope. As a Huffington Post arts article reported it in 2010, they worked in the Santa Marta favela, painting over 34 houses in a 7,000 square meter area at the central square of Praia Cantal. To do so, they lived there and met with locals. They trained some of the younger favela residents in painting workshops and ended up employing 25 locals to finish the project in just 1 month. The result was an explosion of rainbow hues that could be seen from a great distance. As they put it, by empowering the people and bringing color and joy to these people, our hope was to ignite personal and societal change on all levels. Art in the public square. This raises this question. What is an art organization or group in your city that you might consider supporting as a way to bring meaningful human experiences to those who are most vulnerable? Architecture. This is an image of the Reconciliation Church, which was erected in the year 1894. With the division of Berlin in 1945, the parish members of the Protestant Reconciliation Church lived both north and south of the Bernauer Straße. When the Berlin Wall was constructed in 1961, it ran directly in front of the church on its western side and behind it on the eastern side, preventing access to everyone except the border guards who used its tower as an observation post. This put an end to the cross-border congregation. Pastor Hildebrandt was able to hold services on 2 more Sundays. After that, the church remained inaccessible to its West Berlin members. The building was destroyed in 1985 in order, quote, to increase the security, order, and cleanliness on the state border with West Berlin, according to the official justification by the GDR. That there is an aerial image of the Chapel of Reconciliation, which is constructed on the same site. It serves as both a place of worship for the Protestant congregation and part of the Berlin Wall Memorial, officially dedicated in the year 2000. A single victim of the Berlin Wall is commemorated during prayer services, which are held regularly at noon from Tuesday to Friday. It's a beautiful example to my mind of architecture as mission, architecture as a visible sign of the church's commitment to reconciliation. This is a grand example. Most of us will never have access to these kinds of examples, so let me suggest something a little bit more modest. Christ Church Anglican in Austin, Texas, pastored by my brother-in-law, Cliff Warner, is currently undertaking a renovation project. This summer, they are moving to a new location just east of downtown area in Austin, and they'll be occupying what was once Primera Iglesia Bautista de Austin, founded in 1889. And Christ Church is committed to an intentional retention of links with that heritage. Here's Austin. Here's I-35, and then this is where they're located. This is the main downtown area of Austin. Now, they're still in a renovation project, so I don't have images of the final. I have only images of the actual renovation. But I use these as an example of what could be done when a church is engaged in a project of renovation rather than, say, construction. And I'm mindful that we have church planners who are operating in gymnasiums and strip centers and don't have these possibilities. I still think there are places that we can imagine these things played out. But let me just give you 3 examples of how they have intentionally chosen in their architectural decisions and in their financial commitments to be missional in its architecture. So the first thing is let's see, let me go here. This is the street that you would walk down, and then this would be the official entrance to the church. It enters into a courtyard. This is the sanctuary over here. So let me just go back. And so they commissioned, I guess, these doors that are like a screen, because they wanted folks who live in the area, and that 1,000 people walk the sidewalk every day. They wanted the sense that when people walk by, they would have sensed that this church is inviting them to enter in. So the screens is a way to say you can peer in as much as you want. This will be a clear paned glass, gigantic amount of glass that looks into the actual sanctuary. So when a person walks by, they could look in on people worshiping if they were there on a Sundays. This is to the left of that entrance to the courtyard. This is a window seat, a very large window seat into the parish hall. So this gentleman is a worker. He's taking a break, so you could sit there. So the invitation is somebody walking by. If they need a rest, they can sit there and then look around at what people might be doing in the parish hall. So 3 ways they're communicating, you're welcome to this space. There's the side. So it raises this question. What is one way in which your church building might show concrete love to your immediate neighbors? And again, I'm mindful that for many of us, this is a difficult question to figure out how to answer, but perhaps as you look at the next 10 years, 20 years of your congregation's life, maybe there's one thing that can communicate hospitality. All right, now I'm getting to the fun stuff. Virtual reality. My friend Jeffrey Travis is the CEO of a company called Positron. He invented a virtual reality chair. It's called the Voyager. It has been used by Universal Studios and by the Tesla company, among others. Christopher Nolan sat in it. He's the director of all the Batman movies and Dunkirk, and he called it revolutionary. These people sat in it also. Robert De Niro, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and the NASA astronaut Sunita Williams. So has this guy. He sat in the chair. Vladimir. For Jeffrey, the Voyager is a vehicle to transport people, much like Ready Player One, the movie, and the book, into a virtual world. For me, it has me wondering about its place in the life of the church of the future. For Pastor DJ Soto, his use of virtual reality for corporate worship is attracting atheists. As a recent piece in Wired magazine reported, 2 days after he stepped into Alt Space VR, Soto delivered his first sermon there. Sometimes he attracted a dozen people. Sometimes the virtual room where he preached was empty. He didn't mind. In all his years as a pastor, Soto had never had an atheist at his service. Now atheists regularly came to listen to him preach, and they talked openly about their own faith. The people who never felt comfortable walking into a house of worship were happy to join him on Alt Space VR. 10 months after he first strapped on the headset, Soto founded VR Church, the first house of worship to exist entirely in virtual reality. Now, VR as a vehicle for corporate worship may weird us out. It may offend us. It may feel like the goat-horned, abominable antichrist of incarnational ministry. Fair enough. But it might simply prompt us to ask questions about how worship mission could occur in our digital world, not as a substitute for in-flesh discipleship, but as a complement? It raises this question. It's a long question. In what ways might we, A, support fellow believer artists working in the fields of digital technology? And B, what is one way in which our congregations could take advantage of the digital arts to share the gospel, not just with the 20-something young men who play video games all day long, but also, more interestingly and crucially, the homebound and the physically disabled and the elderly, or those who live in parts of the world far from any meaningful Christian community? A question. Photography. I have 3 more and then I'll come to an end. My friend Victoria Jones brought a photographer named Kezia to my attention. Kezia works with children affected by conflict in the Middle East. In 2015, she compiled news photos that document the refugee crisis and set them to excerpts from St. Matthew's account of Christ's birth and the prologue to St. John's Gospel. She called it Alternative Nativity. This is an example. About that time, Caesar Augustus ordered a census to be taken throughout the empire. This was the first census when Quirinius was governor of Syria. Everyone had to travel to his own ancestral hometown to be accounted for. Or this, she matches with, so Joseph went to Bethlehem. He took with him Mary, his fiancée, who was obviously pregnant by this time. Or she matched this image to, so he got up, took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt. Which raises this question. How, in God's name, might our works of art make the familiar gospel strange again? Both for those inside and outside the community of faith. The hospitality arts. I love them. Andy Ashworth, in her book Real Love for Real Life, The Art and Work of Caring, describes her calling this way. She says, I came to respect the kitchen as a powerful and healing place to labor, to understand that cooking, skill, and food knowledge are deeply connected to Christ's teachings about feeding the hungry, and to know that however God might lead me to participate in caring for his world, it would always begin in my own household. For Andy, hospitality isn't to be confused with the glossy covers of Martha Stewart's cookbooks, nor is it about how little or how much money you have. Hospitality is marked chiefly by a generosity of spirit. People feel welcomed in your home because you in your person are welcoming. And beauty doesn't have to be extravagant. It can be simple, like a nice hot cup of tea. So it raises this question to my mind. How might the gospel testify to the generous, spirited hospitality of God if we offered good rather than mediocre coffee to our visitors? What if we saved up our pennies and bought well-designed common benches and tables in our outer spaces rather than cheaply manufactured things? What if we found ways to include lush, indigenous plants in our outdoor spaces rather than plastic or exotic ones? And what if we chose to put excellent art on all the walls of our children's area instead of the leftovers? Hospitality. And it's missional. Lastly, television and movies. What is it that enables the arts to become an effective servant of the church's mission? I suggest to you at the very least, it's a matter of doing something rather than nothing. Or as I told artists under my care, something begets something and nothing begets nothing, I promise you. But more crucial than doing something is doing many things over time rather than only an occasional thing here and there. I wrote an article on Christianity Today a few years ago where I argue that it isn't one television show that reconfigures the imagination of a culture. It's hundreds and hundreds of TV shows. All right, I'm a teacher by day, trade. Here's my pop quiz for the day. Which Christian organization has this as its tagline? Leading the conversation, shaping the media narrative, changing the culture. I say that with an accent. Which organization said that or has that as its tagline? Anybody? Wild guesses? That's a great guess. Yep. One broken wafer at a time. Yeah, a yeasty wafer. No, this is actually the stated mission of the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. And it reminds us that we are all in the same business. We are all in the business of storytelling and culture shaping and ultimately heart forming. Artists on the left and the right and everywhere in between understand that in order to change a society, they have to capture the imagination of that society, and they understand it'll cost them something. It's not, of course, that Christians have failed to take the arts seriously. Plenty have done so, and I thank God for all of their labors and for your good labors. It's rather that typically conservative Christians don't take the arts seriously enough to invest in the sort of institutions, cultures of patronage, communities of artists, and rigorous habits of art making that over decades would yield a winsome Christian presence within the cultural sectors of art and entertainment. If Christians are to shape the imagination of the public square, it will not be due to a single person. It will be due to the body of Christ everywhere, across the globe, releasing its artists to remain faithful to their respective vocations. It'll require a decades-long endeavor, not a few enthusiastic, haphazard years, and it will call for a humble relinquishment of all our efforts and desires to the good and often inscrutable will of God. In my Christianity Today article, I make the case that Friday Night Lights is the kind of art that Christians should be making and supporting. It's the kind of art that helps us not only to imagine what a flourishing, healthy marriage could look like, but also to desire such a marriage. We need a host of works like this, works of art that enable us to name and to celebrate all that is good in the world, art that helps us to articulate the world's brokenness and to inspire us to do something about it, art that invites us to want the good and then the source of all that is good. To conclude, when Christian communities are willing to invest in those who are called to the arts, whether at the centers of power or in grassroots efforts, I believe we are looking not at the failure of the Christian imagination in the public square, but at the gift of a vision of a human life and all its complexities and pleasures for people who may actually yearn for much more of where that came from. Ideas matter, absolutely. Church planning and a cogent presentation of the gospel matters also. But for so many people today, and I used to read about the nones and the spiritual but not religious, but in the last year I find myself surrounded by that category. For them and for many people that you know, not just in Chicago, but in Houston and Istanbul and around the world, it is difficult for them to imagine how the gospel could be good news. They fail to feel that God is a loving and good God. They see no tangible evidence of the gospel in their personal, social, and public lives, which is why I believe the arts matter, among other reasons. Why? Because the arts enable us to grasp the gospel, to feel it deeply, and to imagine what at first glance may seem improbable and even impossible about the kingdom of God. So anytime that art enables human beings to become whole or makes tangible the shalom of God in the world, I believe it fulfills the mission of the Trinity. And with that, I say thank you.